didn't ask. President Trump praises his attorney general for working with the nation's intel chiefs to review the origins of the Russia investigation. The president claims he didn't ask William Barr to do so, but he has repeatedly demanded in public a probe to investigate the investigators. War footing. A new report says the military is planning to stage tens of thousands of troops in the Middle East. After dispatching ships, planes, and defensive missiles to the region, is the U.S. suddenly going on a possible war footing against Iran? And give it back. Kim Jong-un's regime is demanding the U.S. give back a cargo ship seized for allegedly violating sanctions. But why is the North Korean dictator reportedly also demanding that the U.S. send him basketball players? I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news. The House Intelligence Committee has asked lawyers for the president, his daughter and son-in-law, and his business to submit to voluntary interviews tied to Michael Cohen's claims that they helped edit his false testimony to Congress. The committee chairman is warning of a subpoena. Also tonight, the Attorney General William Barr is working with U.S. intelligence chiefs to review the origins of the Russia investigation. The president denies asking Barr to act, but he has repeatedly called for such a probe to, quote, investigate the investigators. That comes as the Trump administration's battle against congressional investigations today moved to a federal court where a judge heard arguments on a House oversight subpoena for documents from President Trump's accounting firm. The judge has stressed that it would be unusual for a court to limit congressional subpoena power. I'll speak with Congressman Chris Stewart of the House Intelligence Committee and our correspondents and analysts. They will have full coverage of the day's top stories. Let's begin with our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. Jim, the Attorney General is heeding the president's call to look into the beginnings of the Russia investigation.
That's right, Wolf. And no surprise, President Trump gave his blessing to Attorney General William Barr's decision to launch an investigation into the origins of the Russia probe that began during the 2016 campaign. But he claimed today in front of reporters that he didn't ask for that. Asked for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. He did pick up one notable endorsement today from Russian President Vladimir Putin. After weeks of complaints about the Mueller report, President Trump is getting what he wanted: an investigation of the investigators who probed Trump campaign contacts with the Russians during the 2016 election. Asked about Attorney General William Barr's move to tap a federal prosecutor to launch an inquiry, the president said it wasn't something he ordered.
No, I didn't ask him to do that. I didn't know it, but I think it's a great thing that he did it. And you know what? I am so proud of our Attorney General that he is looking into it. I think it's great. I did not know about it, no.
But Barr didn't exactly need a nudge. He could just check the president's Twitter feed, such as this tweet from last month that said, investigate the investigators.
Good morning, Mr. Director.
It seems the president has already made up his mind on the subject, criticizing his hand-picked FBI director, Christopher Wray, who testified he didn't think federal investigators were spying on the Trump campaign.
Well, I didn't understand his answer because I thought the Attorney General answered it perfectly. So I certainly didn't understand that answer. I thought it was a ridiculous answer.
That answer from Wray came at a hearing last week.
Do you have any evidence that any illegal surveillance into the campaigns or individuals associated with the campaigns by the FBI occurred?
I don't think I personally have any evidence of that sort.
A rare but notable moment of public disagreement with the Attorney General.
I think there's spying did occur.
While the president has aired his frustration with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, that probe did find a fan in Russia's Vladimir Putin.
Despite the exotic nature of the work of Special Counsel Mueller, we must give him credit.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was meeting with Putin in Russia, warned the U.S. won't tolerate Moscow's meddling in 2020.
Interference in American elections is unacceptable. If the Russians were to engage in that in 2020, it would put our relationship in an even worse place than it has been.
The full scale of that interference is still being revealed, as Florida's governor told reporters today voter databases in 2 of his state's counties were infiltrated by Russian operatives.
For the 2016 election, 2 Florida counties experienced intrusion into the supervisor of election networks. There was no manipulation or anything, but there was voter data that was able to be gotten.
The president is eager to wrap up the Russia probe, complaining he doesn't want his son, Donald Trump Jr., to spend any more time testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee, despite receiving a subpoena to do so.
I have no idea why, but it seems very unfair to me.
On his trade war, Mr. Trump is defending his tariffs on China, tweeting, "Our great patriot farmers will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of what is happening now," despite growing complaints that the U.S. agricultural sector is suffering.
We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly for many, many decades, for actually a long time.
The president is also rejecting reports that his administration is making plans in the event of a massive military confrontation with Iran.
Now, would I do that? Absolutely. But we have not planned for that. Hopefully, we're not going to have to plan for that. And if we did that, we'd send a hell of a lot more troops than that.
And the president is certainly applying pressure on the Senate Intelligence Committee when he says it's unfair for his son to have to spend more time detailing what he knows about Russian interference. But the GOP-led Intelligence Committee appears to have the support of Republican leadership, as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said earlier today he's not going to tell that committee's chairman, Richard Burr, how to do his job. And, Wolf, one thing we should point out, getting back to what Vladimir Putin said about the Mueller probe when he echoed President Trump's line that there was no collusion found by the special counsel's investigation, Vladimir Putin completely overlooked the fact that that same Mueller investigation did find Russian interference occurred in the 2016 election, Wolf.
Yes, it did. All right, Jim Acosta, thank you very much. Now there's more breaking news. Let's bring in CNN's Kara Scannell. Kara, CNN has learned that the House Intelligence Committee is now investigating the role lawyers played, the lawyers tied to the president and his family played in Michael Cohen's false testimony before Congress. What's the latest on that?
That's right. So CNN has learned that the House Intelligence Committee has asked 4 lawyers associated with Trump, his personal attorney, Jay Sekulow, 2 lawyers who work for the Trump Organization, and the lawyer for Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner to preserve documents and be ready to sit for voluntary interviews, all relating to the bigger question of whether anyone had helped mislead his committee, the House Committee's investigation. Now, this stems in part from Michael Cohen's testimony, where he admitted that he lied to Congress when he said about, he was discussing the length and the duration of the talks to develop a Trump Tower in Moscow. Now, what the House Intelligence Committee is looking at as to whether any of these lawyers were involved in those statements, because when Michael Cohen was testifying, he said that changes were made to his statement. He specifically mentioned one of those attorneys. Now, in explaining this, we have a statement from Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And in that, he said that we must determine how expansive the obstruction effort was and whether others were involved beyond those who were indicted. The materials we are requesting in these letters go to the heart of that investigation and to Congress's ability to conduct meaningful oversight. Now, a source tells our colleagues on the Hill that it's possible that Adam Schiff will move to subpoena these lawyers for their testimony. Now, the lawyers are pushing back in letters to the committee saying that they have to protect attorney-client privilege, and we have a statement from one lawyer representing all 4 of those attorneys, and he's saying instead of addressing important intelligence needs, the House Intelligence Committee appears to seek a truly needless dispute, this one with private attorneys, that would force them to violate privileges and ethical rules. As committed defense lawyers, we will respect the Constitution and defend the attorney-client privilege, one of the oldest and most sacred privileges in the law. So it appears that at this point, they're not going to comply with this. We'll see how strong Schiff has to go on this if he does seek to subpoena them. But this is yet another new investigation that we're learning of, this into whether these lawyers were involved in Michael Cohen's false testimony before Congress.
Very interesting. There's another intriguing development. You were in a federal courthouse today when lawyers representing the president and Democrats, they're in a big fight right now about getting access to the president's financial records. What happened?
That's right. So President Trump is trying to stop the House from obtaining accounting records that his accounting firm has. And there was a first test in the courtroom today where we saw them having to make these arguments. Now, the judge overseeing the case said he was not going to rule today and, would not rule this week. But he did quiz both sides, but really appeared skeptical of President Trump's legal team's argument, which they were arguing that any action by Congress was looking to investigate, not legislate. And the judge pushed back on them, saying saying that, there hasn't been a court case since 1880 that limited congressional subpoenas. So it looks like he is leaning to side with Congress, that, saying that there's really very limited, reasons to curtail congressional investigations. He even brought up Watergate and Whitewater, saying, to Trump's attorney, were those legitimate investigative tools and reasons that Congress was looking into those areas? So it appears as though he's leaning toward Congress's side. Now, this is the first courtroom test. We're also going to see another test next week in New York, where the president is also seeking to stop Deutsche Bank and Capital One, two lenders and two banks that he's dealt with, from complying to a House subpoena in that case. So this real issue and the separation of powers is on the table now, and it's now in the courts, where we should see a decision in the near term.
Yeah, I suspect there'll be more legal battles down the road as well. Kara Scannell, thank you very much for that report. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Chris Stewart of Utah. He's a key member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Wolf.
All right, so let's get with the breaking news. You just heard the House Intelligence Committee, your committee, the chairman, Adam Schiff, among others, seeking specific information from various attorneys for the president, his family, his business, in connection with Michael Cohen's claims that clearly were false, that he said they helped him edit that false testimony before Congress about the Moscow Trump Tower project. First of all, do you support this inquiry by your committee?
No, I look, Wolf, if you think you got to beat this dead horse any longer, you got to dig this dude out of the grave to beat it. I mean, look, Mr. Mueller completed his report. There's been so many investigations. This seems to be much, much more of the same. And here's my concern in this. I think this is something that you and others would appreciate. This isn't the purview of the House Intelligence Committee. Our committee is there to look at national security, to look at intelligence issues, to look at things about keeping Americans safe. This has nothing at all to do with that. Now, if you're on the House Judiciary, I understand maybe that committee would look at this and have concerns. But the House Intelligence Committee, this isn't what we were created and designed for. I just think, honestly, it's such a diversion from the things that really matter to most of us on the committee, the reasons we wanted to be on the committee.
But if individuals lied or obstructed information in terms of their testimony before your committee or other House committees during the course of this investigation, don't you want to learn about that? Isn't that the responsibility of Congress if individuals lied?
Well, no, I understand that. And I've said that on your show many times, that people come before our committee and lie. We want to know about that. But honestly, does Mr. Cohen, is there anyone in America who's got less credibility than Mr. Cohen does on this? Every time he's appeared before our committee, including when after his conviction, he came back to our committee and he lied to us once again. There were additional referrals or suggested additional referrals because of that. And I just don't think he has the credibility to open up an entire line of investigation. And I think to back that up, let's remember, he is the one responsible for this statement. It was about information that only he had knowledge of. And for him to now say, well, I did this at the behest of some attorneys, I just don't think it passes a credibility test. But it is this. Look, some of my Democratic colleagues want to keep this president under suspicion, investigations open as long as they can, obviously through the next election at least. And I think they'll follow almost any path in order to do that.
There's another sensitive issue I want to pick your brain on, Congressman. The Attorney General William Barr is now starting a brand new investigation into the origins of the entire Russia probe. And what surprised me is the Inspector General over the Department of Justice is about to finish his own probe into that specific question. Why do you think the Attorney General is launching a new one before the Inspector General concludes his?
Well, I think he's just so deeply concerned, and he felt like maybe having another set of eyes on this. But I'm looking forward to the Inspector General's report. It's something many of us have been looking at for more than a year. For more than a year, many of us have been saying that the predicate, the idea of this, of the investigation and what it was formulated on, is deeply flawed. And I know the Inspector General is looking at, but he's looking at an awful lot of things. It's not just that. He has a plethora of items that he has responsibility for. And I think the Attorney General just felt like this was such an important item that he wanted another set of eyes who looked at just this issue, someone who they knew would have the resources and the time to really pursue it in a meaningful way that perhaps the Inspector General wouldn't have.
But you agree that Russia did interfere in 2016. They did get involved in doing all sorts of things, as the Mueller report, the various U.S. intelligence agencies, all of the current national security intelligence types in the Trump administration, they all agree that Russia was doing it. Wasn't that the reason for the origin of the Russia investigation?
Well, yes, I agree with that. In fact, as I've said on your show a dozen times, not only do I agree that it happened, I was in Moscow just for the election. I came home and said that it's going to happen. Many of us knew that they were going to do it. There's no question. I mean, there's no question at all.
Well, isn't that a legitimate origin? Isn't that a legitimate reason for beginning a probe like this?
It absolutely is, and they should have. But this is something different, Wolf, and this is you're taking people who we now know that the charges against them and the suspicion against them is unwarranted. We know that now. Mr. Mueller was declarative on that. There was no evidence of this. And if that's true, if there's no evidence that would support opening this investigation, then I think it's a very important question, and that is, why did you open it then? Based on what evidence? Look, we're not looking at a mafia family. We're not looking at drug cartels. We're looking at a campaign for the President of the United States. And if you're going to put some of those individuals under surveillance, as we know that they did, and if you're going to put them under where their communications are being eavesdropped, as we know they were, then you better have a good reason for that. And I think that's what the Attorney General and these others are looking at is, was there proper caution? Was there proper political considerations given to that? Or was it done perhaps, as many of us have been concerned about for a long time now, perhaps for political purposes rather than for real national security concerns?
All right, Congressman Chris Stewart of Utah, thanks as usual for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Up next, more breaking news. Russia's Vladimir Putin praises the special counsel's Russia report, saying Robert Mueller found no trace of collusion. But Putin leaves out the part where Mueller found that Russia did indeed attack the U.S. presidential election. And CNN's chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto, there you see him. He's standing by you live. We'll talk about his brand new, very important book entitled The Shadow War: Inside Russia's and China's Secret Operations to Defeat America.